Don't let the fear of trying to find the perfect place to learn stop you from starting at all. Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and today we are taking it back to basics, and I'm going to be answering the 5 most frequently asked questions I get about getting started with calligraphy. I'm also going to be linking to a bunch of my favorite resources, and they will all be in the caption down below, so don't feel like you need to be sitting there scribbling notes or anything. I am a huge fan of punchy, no BS tips, and I just want to answer these questions really quickly for you, so let's jump right in. By far, the most common question I get is this: what's the best place to start learning modern calligraphy? The short answer: anywhere you can. Honestly, don't let the fear of trying to find the perfect place to learn stop you from starting at all. But the longer and more complicated answer, actually the more important answer, is that you want to make sure that wherever you choose to learn from, you're actually starting with the basics. There are a ton of teaching styles out there and different courses, which is great, meaning that there's something for everyone. If you don't like one person's teaching, you can find another's, but some don't necessarily start with the basics. So be on the lookout for courses that are starting with just letter practice sheets, or if they give you an alphabet that you're meant to copy. In those cases, all you're doing is learning someone else's style and learning how to copy it, and down the line, you're going to have a really hard time trying to come up with your own style. What you want to be looking for is courses that start with the words warm-ups or basic strokes or drills. That means that they're actually starting from the beginning, which is going to be the most helpful for you when you're first learning how to do modern calligraphy. And this is where I casually but seriously tell you that my course, Show Me Your Drills, is one of those courses where we start from the very beginning. And it's free, so if you're looking to start from the very start and do things from the ground up, you are totally welcome to join us. Of course, I'm going to put that link down below. Question number 2 is, what's the best pen for a beginner? The short answer is either the Tombow Fudenosuke, which I always don't know if I'm saying right, or the Zebra Funwari. So again, both of those are linked down below, but they are great beginner pens and they're very similar to each other. So either of those is fantastic. They are small tip pens, which means that they're generally easier to maneuver than big tip pens. And if you don't know the difference between those, it's totally okay. But if you're looking for the best beginner pen, you want to try and make sure it's one that has like as small a tip as possible, because they're generally easier to use. That being said though, don't let finding the perfect tool stop you. It doesn't have to be one of the 2 that I just mentioned. There are so many different options for pens out there. And honestly, if you can only get your hands on one type, that type is still better than nothing. So it doesn't have to be one of the 2 that I just showed. Those are just my personal favorites and the ones that I recommend a lot. So I don't want you to feel like you're limited by the 2 that I just showed you. The important part is that you make sure you're using a flexible tipped tool. So a lot of the time when people are getting started with calligraphy, they think that they need those flat, broad edge tips that you see in like older styles of calligraphy or different styles of calligraphy. But if you're on my channel and you're trying to learn modern calligraphy, what you're looking for is a flexible tool. So that can be a brush pen, and there's a million different kinds of brush pens. It could be a pointed pen, so the kind of nib that you dip in ink, as long as it's pointed and not flat on the top. Or it could be a paintbrush, or it could be literally anything that's flexible and that will show you a difference between pressing light on it and pressing hard on it. And that's the very basic of it. The last point I want to make about the tools is, if you're really struggling to find anything, if you live somewhere that doesn't have access to good flexible tools or brush pens, use a pencil. I really want to encourage you that the tool is not the most important part. What's important is that you're practicing. So even with a pencil, you'll be able to see a difference between light lines and hard lines and where you're pressing light and hard, because lead will naturally do that for you. So worst case scenario, use a pencil. I also have a full 50+ page guide about supplies and links to all of my favorite ones. So I'll put that down below for you if you need a little bit of extra help finding your favorite brush pen. Next up is an easy one. I get this question a lot. Can I still do calligraphy as a lefty? Yes. Yes, you can. I get this question all the time, and although I'm not a lefty, I like answering it because it's an easy one. And the answer is just straight up yes. There will be times where you need to modify a couple things and learn and adjust and kind of play around and experiment with how you hold your hand and how you hold different pens. But if you need proof that lefties can do this, go check out Logo's Calligraphy, The Inky Hand, Chalk by Mabs, Designed by Lainey, just to name a few. There are a ton. And I've actually done a couple interviews on this channel with some of those artists, so you can check them out here too. One thing to note as a lefty though is that you might have an easier time using a brush pen when you're starting out than using a pointed pen, which is the one that you dip in the ink. That one can end up getting really smudgy even for righties, so it's a little bit tougher. But if you try using a brush pen first, you might be able to get a little bit of a better handle on how to position your hand and how to push and pull for those thicks and thins. And I'm just gonna say that within the Show Me Your Drills course, we also actually have some guest lefty instructors that come in and do some free videos. So again, I think you should sign up for that. Question number 4 is, my hands are really, really shaky. How can I fix that? The short answer is practice more. And I know that sounds sort of like a cop-out, but unless you have a medical condition that is causing you to be shaky, it's probably coming from a lack of practice or too much coffee, which is a legitimate thing that you might have to cut down on when you try to become a calligrapher. I know I did. Fixing your shakiness could be a combination of different things, all of which will be solved by practicing more. So it could be learning to hold the pen slightly differently. Maybe you're holding it too upright or too, what's the opposite of upright? Horizontal? It could be learning to use your wrist and your forearm and your shoulder as opposed to just finger movements. It could be doing rows and rows and rows of basic strokes just to get the shakiness out of your system. We do that in Show Me Your Drills. Or it could even be a matter of switching which pen you're using. If you're a beginner and you're using one that's really flexible, it could definitely be causing you to be more shaky. But again, all of those tips are going to improve as you practice, because naturally as you practice, you're going to notice these things and you're going to fix them as you go. Question number 5 is one that I get a lot from international students. So the question is, what should I do if I can't afford or have access to supplies and courses to learn calligraphy? So I'm going to attack this in 2 parts. The first part is about the supplies, and I sort of talked about this earlier, but if you don't have access to supplies in your area, you can just use a pencil. Honestly, it's one of the best tools, and it's something that we start with at the beginning of all of my workshops. So if you have access to a pencil, you can totally do calligraphy. You can also use Crayola markers or similar markers that aren't necessarily brush pens, but that maybe your kids have lying around. It's just a matter of getting creative with them. And so there are ways that you can do calligraphy and kind of maneuver your hand and get to know the tool, even though you're not using a brush pen or a flexible tipped tool. So don't limit yourself with the supplies, just experiment with them and see what you can do. For courses, there are tons of people giving away free information online. So my best suggestion is to find artists that you like, follow them on Instagram, go to their websites, read their blogs, download their freebies, join their mailing lists. I mean, you can join mine if you want. I wouldn't be upset. And just take advantage of all the free information that they're giving away, even on like Instagram posts or Pinterest articles and everything like that. There's so much you can learn without having to spend a cent. Just again, make sure that if you're looking at people's free content, that you're trying to still start with the basics. Don't just look up bouncy alphabet and try and copy that alphabet. Try and find their articles from before that where they're talking about the beginner strokes, the basic strokes, or the drills or the warm-ups. Make sure you're doing all of that first before you start learning the alphabets. So this is where I again mention that my course, Show Me Your Drills, is free, and that's what we do in there. If you're interested in learning from the ground up and you just want some free basics, I would love to have you in the course. Of course, again, the link is down below, but if you need to, you can just go to showmeyourdrills.com, and it only opens twice a year. So go and check that out, and I would love to have you. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you have any more beginner questions, I would love to answer them for you, so just leave them down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.